Greetings! In today's video, I will be taking a look at some watercolor paints made in Canada by Tree Art. For a tiny bit of background info, it's a brand that I've seen in all the stores around here, and I've always seen it for like gesso, acrylics, palettes, supplies, that kind of stuff. A lot of mediums, and I never realized that they also made watercolors until not too long ago. Most of the places that I would shop for art supplies, they didn't stock their watercolors. And then at some point, I realized that they have watercolors. They sell them in pans and in tubes. Now, the pans are a unique format, I would say. I don't think I've seen any other company offer the pans in this size. So you kind of need to be either crafty or to get the bamboo palette that they also sell to put your pans in it. I really like that the pans are kind of big, like a nice surface for picking up paint and working your brush. That's good. What I will be taking a look at though is a selection of tubes. I have 7 colors. I have nickel azo yellow, so pigment PY 150. I have pyrrole orange, pigment PO 73. Quinacridone magenta, pigment red 122, PR 122. Ultramarine blue classic, PB 29. Phthalo blue green shade, PB 15 column 3. Burnt sienna, PBR 7. And finally, Mars black, PBK 11. This is a bit of a peculiar selection. If I had a better reference point, perhaps I would have grabbed a red instead of the pyrrole orange, just so I can have the most ultimately versatile color selection, but this worked out really well, in my opinion. So the very first thing I wanted to do was swatches, and I decided to do a bit of a color mixing chart as well, with just 7 colors. That's doable. That's not too much time and paint. As you can see, it's a relatively balanced color selection. You can get a reasonable amount of secondary colors through it, some oranges, some greens, some purples, and then you have other colors in there, more neutral ones, earth hues, that kind of stuff. I feel like both blue, when mixed with the burnt sienna, they give us some really interesting neutral colors. With the ultramarine blue, we get a cooler, just a little bit purplish neutral, and with the phthalo blue, we get one that's a bit more warm, a bit more orange. So I thought that was interesting. I really like the mixes with the Mars black too, because they all have that Mars black granulation that is pretty cool. As for the paints themselves, they come in these plastic tubes with a plastic cap, and they're the kind of tubes that you have to poke a hole through a membrane at the opening of the tube with the back of the cap. It's a bit hard to describe, but I'm pretty sure you can figure out what I mean by looking at the video. So it was interesting to work this way. I don't think I've worked with many watercolor tubes that came in this kind of closed off tube. The paints had different consistencies. Some were a bit more thick, some were a bit more liquid. I tried mixing them up a bit, but it's always a bit difficult to mix up a tube. But overall, everything dried well in the little pans that I had set up, and the paints were easy to re-wet. I didn't have any issue with that. I opted to put the paints in this particular palette for 2 reasons. First, I was really curious about this setup that I saw someone share on the Discord server we have for this community, and they had sort of MacGyvered their palette to have some of those really thin makeup metal pans and then space for tubes in the main body of the palette. And I was like, oh, I have 7 colors here in tubes. I could probably fit them in the body of the palette and then have the pans, and then if I need more paint, I have the tubes with the pans. Awesome! So that's kind of what I was going for. So a really interesting color setup, and also to be able to store everything together, which is always a good selling point for me. I went with the little pans that I had on hand. I quite like this format of pans because they are spacious enough to give you room for your brush again, but they're not deep, so you never really end up digging with your brush in those little pans. Once that was all done, the pans were dry, the paint was all set up, I wanted to try them with a little painting. So I looked again at some photos from Pinterest until something felt inspiring, gave me a bit of an idea for a scene or something. This is what I drew. I have a time lapse a bit later for the sort of second half of the painting. For the first half of the painting, I did it during the trial run of my members live stream, which is something that I'm sort of figuring out. You can opt to be a member on this channel to help support the channel and myself, and I was thinking of having members only live streams in addition to the Saturday live streams. So yeah, the members live stream would be sort of a work live stream. So I would be working on some stuff and you can be working alongside and we can all like chat paint, chat food like we always do, but during the week. Anyway, the paints were a lot of fun to use. I had a really easy time working with them. I did the same kind of process that I always do. So first pass wet in wet, the colors flowed really well. Not the kind of really extreme flow that's difficult to control, but enough that the colors kind of diffuse and mix together, which is what I like of this step, is to get everything a bit messy. But at the same time, it's never really a mess that gets overwhelming because it's the first pass. So the colors are light and layering on top of everything kind of helps redefine areas and whatnot. Anyway, I let that first layer dry and then it was time to start piling on more layers on top of all this. So it's a lengthy process, it's a lot of layers because I don't necessarily know what I want as a final result. I kind of have to work at it in steps and to progressively adjust what I'm painting to match what I want it to look like. As you can also see, I'm not really bothering with staying within some of the lines. There are some lines that I try to stay within, like the line between the sky and everything else, but for most of the stuff, like I painted over some of the trees with the colors of the rock, and I know that I'm going to be painting the trees a darker color later on, so I don't really mind that there's this mess going on. I feel like ultimately it's going to make everything more cohesive because a bit of all the colors is going to be in everything. The colors layered well, I was able to mix them really well in my palette. They also re-wet really easily, either from the pans or from the palette. I was able to reuse my mixes that had dried. The color selection that I have, I think, worked out really well for this specific drawing. I like to be able to use the Mars Black to add some texture in areas where there's a lot of little visual details, but that I don't want to render, like the texture of the ground, everything that has a lot of tiny little rocks, everything that looks a bit more rough. It's a really good granulation and really good color for that. As I did not have a way to get a convincing red with these colors, it was really interesting to try to work towards a color that I liked for the rocks because they're really reddish in the reference. And I was really going for that contrast of the reddish rocks and the greener trees. So it was really interesting to mix these colors to get as close to possible as the effect that I wanted to create. Many layers later, this is what I ended up with. I think it worked out really well. I really like these colors. I think I would definitely get a few more just to really optimize my palette, though I might not be able to fit more tubes in the main body of this particular thin, but I feel like there's definitely more colors that would be really fun to work with. You can also work out perfectly fine with just the basics, which is a bit like what I have right now. Beautiful colors. I'm really glad that they're made here. I think that's awesome. We don't have a lot of companies that make art supplies on a sort of big commercial scale here. We have a lot of really cool, more indie kind of paint makers. We have Beam Paints, we have E&L, like I mentioned in a previous video, and we also have Tree Art that have watercolors. I just wish they were more spread out. You can get the watercolors from their website, which I think is great, but yeah, I had never seen these in store ever. And things might be different now, but I used to be quite regular at the art supply store, and in all this time I had never seen these paints. I couldn't find really any info as if they are sort of a more recent addition to their range of products. Perhaps that's why I haven't seen them before, but I'm really glad I know of them now, and I will definitely keep an eye out for these paints. They are made here, they're affordable, I like the color selection, they have a few colors that are quite particular to their range, like a bit like custom colors that I think would be a lot of fun to test out. And yes, the colors that I have, I'm really happy with. I love the yellow. It's really transparent, I would say, and I also really like the hue of the burnt sienna. I know that that's a pigment that can vary a lot in hue, but I really like this particular hue of it. I think it's a lot of fun. So I was wondering, are you guys familiar with Tree Art's supplies? Perhaps you've seen their gesso, their mediums, their acrylic, that kind of stuff. And I would be really curious to see if you have, and just a ballpark of where you're located to figure out where it's spreading out. I think that would be fun. Let me know what you think of these paints and the painting and everything I've shown you in this video. And thank you so much, Tree Art, for the beautiful paints. I am really looking forward to painting more things with these and to try out new colors. Thanks for watching, and see ya all in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.